Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by your friends at Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
This is Byron O'Neal for Book Yeti, sitting down today with Patrick Lugo, the creator behind the graphic novel A Tiger's Tale, funding now on Kickstarter. Welcome and happy Lunar New Year.
Well, thank you so much. And Gong Shi Fotsai would be a way to say it. So happy Lunar New Year of the tiger to you too.
Well, I'm pretty excited about it. I'm a tiger myself, born in 1974. So hopefully this year will bring good fortune to both of us. Yeah,
well, you know what they say? They say that for the year of the animal, it's either going to be really good or really bad. So you have to just be your best self at that time. I've had one friend who they describe him as a tiger with wings, be a tiger with wings. So.
Well, you've described A Tiger's Tale as Avatar: The Last Airbender meets The Jungle Book. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about the story?
Oh, well, the story is about a young Prince Khan, right? He's the Prince of Tigers and living in the jungle as any tiger would want to. But his mother, the queen, adopts two human foundlings. But rather than do what any tiger would do with a delectable morsel, she adopts them and raises them. This causes Khan to grow jealous because while his human brothers are learning from the entire forest, right? The trees, the animals in the trees, the animals in the rivers, Khan can only be a tiger. And he starts to resent his brothers for their ability to be other things, to be whatever they are, whatever they choose to be. Out of that desire to kind of level that playing field, he goes against the Tao, let's say. He goes against the natural order of things. The result is catastrophic. He ends up in exile. And then years later, he now has to reconcile with his brothers, kind of protect them and join them on a quest to restore balance to the world, trying to reestablish a natural order.
Well, the idea started as a serial in Kung Fu magazine, as I understand it. So how does a comic strip kind of fit in with a martial arts magazine? They're not two things you would think naturally would just kind of blend together.
It's true. I mean, there have been a handful of other comics. And if you can think of, how popular ninjas are in comics, right? There's some crossover. But, early in my career working for Kung Fu magazine, I demonstrated enough success that I was able to pitch the concept of a comic. And we framed it as educational. It would be something that I could use to answer reader questions. So they connected me with a historian, right? An Asian museum historian. And we would we started the first ones just on spec, but we quickly cultivated a readership who would ask us questions. I could then take those questions to the historian or to the visiting Kung Fu masters that I was working with for cover photo shoots and kind of collect their perspective on those questions and then just open up a dialogue that I could then just squirrel away all these tidbits of wisdom and these very personal interpretations of those classic fortune cookie sayings. From there, we were able to create this comic strip that focused mostly on the human brothers as these two wandering purveyors of wisdom. And each episode was like a little done-in-one story answering some kind of question. How useful is meditation? Why do we bow when we enter the training yard of a martial arts school? Those sorts of things. Over the years, they gave me more freedom. I could add more pages. I was kind of answering reader letters. So they allowed me to do like a special issue that was a 10-page story with a center spread. And that's the genesis of what would become the graphic novel, A Tiger's Tale, where it was no longer about answering specific questions, but it was taking this cosmology I had been assembling and, creating a story for it. And so it gave me a chance to reveal the third brother, which was the actual tiger.
How long have you been working on A Tiger's Tale in the magazine then? Sounds like a while.
It ran for about 3.5 years. before we attempted to launch it as like an online cartoon, which didn't really work. It ended up getting snagged in developmental limbo for a number of years. But then that allowed me to just focus on what other formats I could work with. So the done in one little chapter by chapter comics were a great way to just refine techniques and to learn so much about the subject matter that I could then, consolidate into one story.
Well, and it started as black and white, but you wanted to color the book for Kickstarter. So why?
Yes. Well, I had always been attached to the concept of it being a black and white comic. Imagine my influences of Bone and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? So there was a great love for those kind of indie stories. On top of that, there was kind of how can I say it, like an artistic quality, right? Black and white, yin and yang. There was just kind of like a sense that this should be a black and white story. But as I was researching Kickstarter and really kind of taking a close look at the audience I want to appeal to, which skew younger, I'm kind of really trying to put this comic in the hands of the young martial artists who along with learning how to punch and kick could also use the opportunity for some more deeper insights or some of the more philosophical questions that are hidden within martial arts. So looking at that and looking at the body of work I was trying to create, it just seemed like color would be the ideal way to go. And it would also allow me to really refine and update a lot of the artwork. It would also let me express the latest techniques that I'm learning, right? Like Tiger's Tail was always about me conveying what I was understanding in terms of martial arts. So there was always like a component of it should be a little bit improvised. It should be in the moment, I guess like that Zen feel I wanted to capture. And so I felt like adding color would give it the most immediacy.
It's really beautiful book. I mean, texturally, it's imaginative and it reminds me of one of those fairy tales or fable-based classic children's books, So your target audience is everybody or, more kids or?
Well, I definitely, if I was to be speaking to a librarian or to an agent, I would say it's a middle grade graphic novel, right?
Okay.
Kids, whatever, 10 through 15. But I've written it in such a way that it has visual humor and little bits of jokes that should be appealing to older readers, to the teenagers that are also going to, their kung fu schools, or to the adults that are reading to their kids. I learned how to read by my father reading comics to me. So I kind of want that in there too. So I want an adult to read it and get a little chuckle because of a reference or because of a play on words that might just not even be absorbed by a young reader. So I'm trying to get it all in one book. We'll see if it works.
That's always tricky. I mean, you worked on other projects with, young adults or kids in mind, your award-winning project, The Little Monk and the Mantis. So what draws you to wanting to tell those stories and capture that younger audience?
Oh, I mean, like I said, I feel like comics really speaks to like that part of me that was really young, discovering them because my older brothers had a box of comics. And so, I was finding comics that would be considered classics, Carmine Infantino, Flash. And I had no idea. I was just, enamored. It helped me read. It was easier to read than the other books that were available. And so before going to school, I just had that comic thing. And then, there was a phase where comics became for adults only. And it always seemed like, there's that missing chance that there's maybe this generation of kids that just aren't capturing or being caught up by that mystical quality. There's waiting to get old enough for comics to be cool, And so
yeah.
I've always had that idea of like, oh, there should always still be something, and then combined with the subject matter, I could, my publishers think comics are for kids. They don't quite understand that there's comics for adults. So let me frame my comic strip as a comic for kids. And I could keep that, candle lit until the industry goes full circle and comics for kids again.
We're getting there. Yeah. There was a concept on the Kickstarter launch page that I wasn't super familiar with, wuxia. So hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly and doing it justice.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the genre itself, and how a tiger's tail fits into it.
So wuxia is kung fu fantasy, right? It's a really old genre, originating in China. It's influenced the classic Peking opera, but most people would recognize it from those black belt theater movies that we may have watched on Sunday. It's just these stories that are about martial arts knights. So there's a strong moral chivalry component to it. And there's also a strong self-cultivation component, right? So if you can think of modern examples, right? Avatar: The Last Airbender, or even Marvel's Shang-Chi, right? There's the fight scenes, but there's also an important quality that has to do with self-cultivation. So I'm pushing that boundary with A Tiger's Tale because I'm trying to talk about how martial arts is not just about fighting, right? There's a greater scope to the concept of kung fu than just being able to break bricks, so I'm trying to explore that aspect of things while at the same time embracing the fact that wuxia really has arrived in the States. Like I mentioned, Shang-Chi is being a great mainstream example, but there are other publishers, more and more of them, that are really recognizing its value. If you look at DC Comics, just published The Monkey Prince, right? The Monkey Prince being a superhero version of one of China's great mythological martial arts heroes, the Monkey King.
Right.
So it's just like now is the time where there are other comics recognizing it. There are other, forms of media that are just recognizing this specific genre.
So why use the tiger as your main kind of character to tell that story?
Well, it comes back from the origins of where the series was born, right? The series was born in Kung Fu Magazine. The publishers of Kung Fu Magazine is a company called Tiger Claw.
Yeah, so, I'm familiar. Yep.
Pitching the comic to the executives of Tiger Claw.
Got it.
There was a better opportunity that they'd accept it if I included tiger as a part of the concept. Added to that, the tiger is just so widely revered within martial arts culture, not just in Kung Fu, Shotokan karate. It's considered the king of the beasts and a huge chunk of the world where the lion is considered much more mythical. So to write a comic that was martial arts themed, but to make it more fantastical, I could go the route of, Shang-Chi, Iron Fist, that young neophyte who learns how to fight. Or I could go completely mythological, and going mythological meant a talking tiger, which, came back to the thoughts of the Jungle Book, where what if rather than the tiger being a villain, the tiger was a hero? How can we frame that whole story?
Chinese folklore is one of the richest traditions on the planet. So we've got the tiger. So what other kinds of fantastic beasts do we have in there that are going to stimulate the imagination?
Well, there's the tiger. If you look at Chinese astrology, there's a wheel of 12 animals that are used in place of Western astrology, which uses, Capricorn, Pisces, etc. So starting with the tiger, I've played with a few other concepts. The rat being another one that's in there for mischievousness. There'll be some more mythological creatures that will be there to kind of challenge the tiger, since the tiger is considered the king of beasts. What happens if that beast has to encounter creatures that, are of an order different? The biggest example being dragons, right? Dragons are the other, primary symbol of martial arts. And if you can look back at those old David Carradine TV shows, right, where he gets the brand that is a tiger and a dragon. So dragons also figure extremely prominently in the comic. I like to think of it as the story of learning how to be a tiger amongst dragons, right? Learning how to be truly courageous in circumstances that are much bigger than you are.
Well, it's a deeply philosophical project. I mean, this is much more than just fight scenes. So if you had to choose one thing that you'd want to leave the reader with, from a philosophical or moralistic perspective, what are we going for here?
I'm trying to bring to mind the quest to come back to oneself, right? To recognize what's valuable for oneself and what's a personal truth, right? Khan starts off a tiger wanting to be something other than a tiger, and in coming to accept, his circumstances and act responsibly for himself, not only does he realize being a tiger is enough, he ends up becoming like the exemplar of what any tiger could be. And then that story, spans out. So I want the stories to kind of inspire the imagination for a reader to think of what more they can be. What is it that's holding them back in their own, personal sense of loss, or their own personal sense of grief. What petty jealousies are holding them back, I guess would be a better way to say it.
Okay. I mean, as a daily practitioner of Qigong I have an extensive background in, various forms of martial arts. I get it. I'm very appreciative of kind of the journey, right? So you've been working on this for some time. How is the journey of being an artist and trying to kind of present this to other people? How has that affected you? How has it changed you?
It's been so gratifying to see those folks who really believe in the project. I feel I'm biased. I've been working on this project for so long that I'm just committed to making it happen. They've been with me, and if I'm not their hero, then no one else will be. But then having put it on Kickstarter, but also having done the steps to get it ready for Kickstarter and, create the website at tigerstail.com just to have a place where I could, show previews and invite dialogue has allowed me to see other people who are excited about the project. And some of these people I have such great admiration for, so it's not just, oh, this person likes comics, so it's cool that they like my project. These are kung fu masters who look at some of the art and look at some of the mission statement, and they recognize that this is trying to further their tradition of communicating old teachings, but within the new medium of comics.
So what got you started in illustration comics in the first place?
It's just something I took to as a very, very young child. It was, just being the third brother. I had two significantly older brothers who were very active, and they did their own martial arts. So I could watch them doing that sort of thing. But being smaller, I couldn't really compete in their tussles. So I could focus on something I was good at, which was, drawing. And that, that my folks recognized my facility early enough that they kept a steady supply of pens and pencils and crafty tools that allowed me to keep pushing that particular skill further along.
Well, I know you're really excited about your guest cover artist, Grandmaster Tu Jing Shen. That's right?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did he get involved with the project?
Well, okay. So here's an example of art bringing people together, right? Grandmaster Tu came. I met him through my work at Kung Fu Magazine. His reputation led him to the magazine for a cover feature. So I got to direct the photo shoot where we were going to use him on the cover. I was fortunate enough to lay out many of the magazine articles that we wrote about him. Added to that, he was an incredible showman, right? He was renowned for these great feats of, chopping blocks of ice or steel bars. But on top of that, he was an amazing artist. So he would be doing these feats where he could chop a steel pipe, and then he would go and do a painting to show how his hands didn't hurt. After chopping a pipe, he could still do a nice painting. And so we kind of connected on the art front because I worked on illustrating children's books. I always had my sketchbook handy, and old technique I like to use was to draw maybe a caricature of the Kung Fu master to help bridge any language barriers. So we immediately bonded on the art front. He ended up gifting me one of his art books that features his, amazing calligraphy and his amazing traditional paintings. And I gave him as a gift my children's book, which was martial arts themed as well. So I had practiced writing some Chinese characters, and he was impressed that I was willing to try and undertake that particular art form of the Chinese calligraphy. And so we just would always bond on the art level outside of maybe him facilitating a few Qigong, sessions for the magazine, for the staff of the magazine. I mean, he ended up subletting one of our offices so that he could teach his classes, in the alternate hours. And he just surrounded that office with all of his works of art. So inspiring. So while I was working, to develop a Kickstarter campaign, they say you should try and find an artist that can offer an alternate cover to give backers something interesting. And I just thought, considering the spirit of the comic, it should be something special. I could reach out to various comic artists, and, there were some that I was like, oh man, wouldn't it be awesome if they did a cover? But then I was like, let me also reach out to someone who can do a real traditional work of art. And Master Two agreed. He was like, not only should you have a cover, let me give you another painting to just, to share, to put out there, because there's a lesson in that painting that people need to know. So I ended up researching it. I wrote some essays on that painting that's at the website, and then I'm going to use it in the book itself. I ended up adding a few pages to the story to kind of help highlight that particular aspect of Kung Fu history within the comic itself.
Yeah, I mean, you're fully funded at this point. So on the subject of guest covers and, stretch goals, other things that backers can support on there, what else have you got?
Well, okay, so my biggest exciting thing was that the comic was added. We added 10 more pages to the comic. We're gonna probably add a few more stickers so that the next stretch goal will give everyone extra stickers. One other idea I've been thinking was a gatefold cover to really highlight some of the art pieces that Master Two has allowed me to use. But then the real interesting stretch goal that I'm still putting together, it's kind of the farthest one out there, but it's the most ambitious, right? I'm going to call it the Comics Fu Reader. And it's going to be a small anthology of comics that have been specifically created by other martial arts masters, Kung Fu masters of specific styles that love comics as well. And they're communicating either a piece of history or their own comics project. And since this whole thing is about trying to get the world of the world of Kung Fu out in front of the world of comics, I wanted to elevate their voice as well. So
that sounds like an incredible collaboration opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, there's a martial arts concept that has to do with, martial artists teaming up and holding, they call it, there's all different ways that they describe it, right? Holding the door open for another martial artist. And so I think this is my way of trying to also capture that spirit, especially since I've been supported so much by people connected to or deeply immersed in the martial arts community. So this is my chance to give them a little bit of a spotlight as well.
Pay it forward. That's where it's at.
Exactly.
So this is volume 1. You're fully funded. Is there a volume 2 now? You like the freedom that you have? Okay, I'm good here. What's next?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely already, looking at the calendar for volume 2, because I really just wanted volume 1 to establish this world and to establish the key players. And so, as in any good story, now that you've established all that, I want to put it all in extreme peril. So volume 2 is going to be very much about, taking this world that I built up and then just, pushing it to that next level of what can put it under its greatest threat, right? The volume 1 is personal. Volume 2 is going to be global.
Expanding.
Yes.
Well, we've talked about A Tiger's Tale. Are there other projects that you have going on you want to highlight?
For the most part, I really want to focus on the Year of the Tiger as being the year of A Tiger's Tale. So I've got volume 1. I'm looking to create volume 2, but I really want the website itself to be a hub for people to come back to for the sake of learning resources and for the sake of engagement. And I want people to join me on this journey. Tiger's Tale has been such a journey that only now is kind of being presented to a greater audience. So I want as many of them to join me on the rest of that journey as is interested.
So your website is?
It's atigerstale.com, but remember to spell it like a story. So it's TALE at the end. The other website that you could reach me at is my personal artistic website, which is Plugo Arts, PLUGO ARTS. I have this habit of picking really bizarrely spelt websites. I should try something simple like patricklugo.com.
You got to stick with it now, though.
I know I'm stuck with it. So the one that I want people to check out is atigerstale.com. That's the one that's really all hands are. That's the one that's growing like daily, with new posts and new features. This
is just my own personal, I've wanted to ask this, right? So you've had all this exposure to these amazing practitioners of different kinds of martial arts over your tenure working for Kung Fu Magazine. What's the coolest experience that stands out to you?
Oh, the coolest experience. I mean, I got to do a one-on-one photo shoot with Lou Reed and his Tai Chi master.
Oh, cool.
And so that had it all because Lou Reed, godfather of punk rock, right?
Yep.
One-on-one photo shoot in a completely bizarre circumstances. It was like the 10-year anniversary for the magazine. So we were like literally in this we weren't in a controlled studio. We were just like in a one of those conference rooms that we had just set up with the lighting. And then his Tai Chi master, who's a renowned martial artist named Ren Guanyi, who I've taken seminars with, and the guy is built like a tank. And I've never seen someone so big, but also so fluid. It's amazing. And so here he is, really making Lou Reed, who, godfather of punk rock, really making him sweat so that he could be in the proper Kung Fu pose for my photos. And here I was like watching these titans at work from different art styles all converged. That was pretty fun. There's been others, but that one just, that one transcends just martial arts nerdery and goes into like a bigger realm, I think.
That is pretty special. Well, Patrick, it's been a pleasure getting to talk to you about A Tiger's Tale. I'm a backer. I'm personally really excited to get a chance to get this, in my opinion, little gem of a book in my hand. So I really appreciate your work. And I thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Brian. I really appreciate your time and just being a part of this. I've been admiring your work for a while. So the chance to speak.
Thank you.
Be amongst them, it feels very artistically validating for someone who's just been, up in the hill doing his drawings,
I appreciate it. Well, this is Byron O'Neal for Comic Book Yeti. Thanks everybody for listening. Take care. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner. We also have a podcast of the same name that you can download wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner, maybe you would enjoy our sister podcast, Into the Comics Cave. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.